I am live. Let's do this guy. I guess I should have started my timer before.
Yeah, it's cut down to 2 or 3.
Yep, just cut it way down. Did it stop? It did. It's going to be a manual countdown if I don't figure this out. There won't have to be one at all. Okay, there's that. Whew. I like our image for head hopping. It's like here, there, everywhere.
Just pass it along.
Heads are rolling. I will admit, this was a really terrific learning opportunity for me. So, Gareth, as the expert, I learned a ton getting prepared for this. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Hopefully it's interesting for everybody else as well. Well, I see Ryan just tend to head hop a lot. So hopefully 1 or 2 tips here to help keep that under control.
Right. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. So the music in the background is called Thoughts. So that's going to give us a little bit of a spoiler. My themed spoiler music there. Right. Okay, great. I can see people coming in. Hey, Ryan. Hey, Skip. I can see folks coming in from all of our stream locations. So
Hello.
It's Beth here. Oh, hey, April. Good to see you. I'm Beth here with Gareth. So we'll give folks 5. Should we do a big countdown? I say this every time. I get so excited. A big countdown makes it more real. And we are ready to get started. Let me switch my screen over. Remove that. Share something more different. Now I understand why people need a producer for their shows. I get it now, right? Like, oh, you mean to press all the buttons and do all the things instead of, like vamping and telling everybody what I'm doing. It's a play-by-play. It's kind of a mix between sports and writing. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you again for joining us today with AutoCrit for Deep Dive Live. Beth here with Gareth.
We're back.
So today we're going to talk about head hopping. And I don't know about you guys, but I had in my mind that this was something a little bit different than what it is. So we're really excited to dig in and give you all the nuts and bolts and ins and outs, innermost thoughts about head hopping. But first, what is head hopping, right? I know you can't. A bunny. I looked for a cat video as always, but so head hopping is when you switch perspective between multiple characters within a single scene, and maybe within a single chapter, but definitely within a very short time span. So we're calling that like a single scene. Yeah. So the first thing, and you can see I've highlighted or italicized a few of the keywords here. So we want to just square away some verbiage, because you'll hear the words viewpoint, perspective, and point of view kind of used interchangeably, but we're going to dig in like we do. We're going to dive deeper here in Deep Dive Live and get to what is actually different, because those 3 words, though everyone has heard them used interchangeably, no doubt, they actually mean different things. So, Gareth is overseas in the UK, so he probably did not grow up with Sesame Street like I did here in the US. And they had a segment called, like, one of these kids is doing his own thing. One of these kids is not like the rest. So they had one that was different. And in this list of 3, we have one that's different. So audience, which one is different? I thought about trying to find the
find a clip of it.
Segment. Yeah. But I I'm not going to tell exactly what year I was watching that. Let's say in modern times, it may not be the most sensitive kind of thing to put up. Like, here's a bunch of children and one of them's different. Point out the one that's different. So we're going to take a bit of liberty with this one. And between point of view, viewpoint, and perspective, which one is different? And if you don't have a guess,
strictly
that's okay
different.
Too.
Yeah.
That's okay too. Strictly, very strict, right? So we're getting into the techniques and the technicals of what is different. Okay, I'm going to reveal point of view. People are like, I have no idea. I'm just going to pretend this isn't happening. Go. Point of view is the voice of the character or the narrator. Viewpoint and perspective are the same in that they speak about the mind of the character or narrator. So when we're thinking about that, what does that mean? Gareth, what are your thoughts? What's in your mind?
Simply put, this is one of these things we just want to get out of the way because, you do tend to use them. Even I will sometimes just use them interchangeably. But for this topic, we really have to understand the difference between them. And when it comes to point of view, strictly speaking, in fiction, we're talking about whether that's first person, second person, or third person narration that the reader is actually reading. So your narrator's voice. Whether they're speaking directly about themselves or it's kind of an outside view describing the story to you. And there are two different types of third-person point of view that we'll actually touch on here, but there's third-person limited and third-person omniscient. And the third-person limited point of view means it's a third-person narrative. So you're being told, Beth walked to the fridge, as though we're kind of watching that like on a movie screen.
So it's a little bit outside the action watching it.
It is. It's outside of the characters. But when it's limited, in the limited version, everything that the information that we're told is all limited to Beth's perspective or viewpoint. So we are inside her head. And even though we're being told everything from a kind of cinematic, that outside point of view, we're still limited to what she knows, thinks, feels, and sees. So...
And I would say when we're thinking about viewpoint or perspective, it's not just that it's limited to what I know about. It's also maybe colored or informed by my worldview, my attitudes, my biases, my experiences. So there are the things that I've experienced and I know them. I've experienced riding a bicycle. I know what that's like. Or it could be, a bias or a kind of worldview attitude that I just have as part of my character makeup. So that would really kind of inform or color what the narrator is saying because of their worldview.
Exactly.
If I've had a bad experience with dogs, then when I'm the narrator, I'm like, ugh, there's another dog. But someone who's had tons of great experience and is a dog person would have a different voice, if you will.
Yeah, it could be exactly the difference between, somebody, a character looking at someone's clothes and thinking that's beautiful or it's gaudy, that really just differences in attitude that show up in there.
Exactly. And so as an example, when you open a scene or open a paragraph or chapter with a sentence like this, Amanda stepped into the ballroom. That really does a few things. One, it sets your reader's context that we're going to be seeing things from behind Amanda's eyes. So we're Amanda and we're looking through her eyes. Everything that's happening beyond that is really going to be from her perspective. So flavored with her thoughts, her feelings, her perspectives, her attitudes. It's all about Amanda. Man, in this example, I should have changed it to Beth. It's all about Beth. It can be all about Amanda for this one scene.
Just head hopped.
Yep, just head hop. Come on over. Absolutely. And there's why it's not always bad. So, if in the course of that scene, so the second thing it does, like it gives you what your context is, so you know who the narrator is and what point of view they're using. the second thing is, if this is the first character you're announcing or introducing in that scene, sequence, chapter, it really anchors your reader. So they're thinking about Amanda. And as you progress through that segment, if you start to reveal thoughts and feelings of the other characters as they're interacting maybe with Amanda, then you might be head hopping. And it could get a little confusing if you do it too often, if you don't make it excruciatingly clear, if you go back and forth, and even if you are making it clear, if you do it too frequently and too quickly, you'll get what's the phrase, Gareth? Reader
whiplash.
So they're just whipping back and forth, and you're like, oh God, my head is spinning, my neck is sore, genuinely from trying to just kind of keep up with who's narrating, what's their worldview, how is this really kind of driving the scene forward, and what kind of colors are coming into that point of view based on their perspective. So they inform one another, but that reader whiplash is so real if you're doing it too frequently and kind of taking it too far. Like, it's best used sparingly, like hot sauce, let's say.
Yeah, if you have extremely distinct characters, I guess, as you should, and a good story.
That's good.
If within a very, very short space of time, we're talking paragraphs here, and you're jumping back and forth between two different people's perspectives, it really can get confusing as to who's thinking what at any point. It's like, was that them? Oh no, that was them. And
yeah,
I think we'll mention some symptom of that in a moment. But
absolutely. So it is risky business, a little bit risky to head hop, and there are kind of three main reasons, two of which are related. So it's confusing to the readers, as we just said, if you're doing it too frequently, if you're not crystal clear, etc. Two, it can really break that immersive experience. And we talk sometimes about pulling the readers through your words and letting them really be inside the scene and really getting lost in your story. If they're noticing the words on the page, if they're having to work too hard to understand the story, then they're not inside the story. And you want to really avoid that for an excellent reader experience. And the third thing, it's really tough as the author to maintain that. You could be humming along and in your mind, it's cool, it's clear that you've switched and you're slipping into pronoun usage instead of making that clear transition, or you accidentally jumped back and forth and didn't realize it, and you start using he thought and she thought, and that's a slippery slope. Things are going to go
that's
south.
A big one to step in, and
real fast.
You usually find it happen if you're head hopping quite a lot, because to go to the second point there, the immersive experience thing is like it takes time for readers to get to know characters. So give them that time to do it. You'll have other space, and we'll tell you here other different ways to kind of space that out so they can get to know all your characters. It doesn't have to be all at the same time. Let people just kind of fall into the experience and sit in someone else's skin for a while without jumping back and forth.
And that's what they want, right?
And it is tough to maintain, because if you've got like 4 characters that you're hopping between in a sentence, and you got name here, name here, name here, name here, when you try to mix up the writing by introducing, because of course you don't want to be repeating character names over and over again, it gets a little repetitive, you might switch to pronouns. So then you're saying he thought, she thought, and that really gets confusing. You'll start to find like who thought which one.
One out.
But I thought that was against their character. Oh, but they're talking about the other one. Oh,
yeah. Oh, I thought they didn't like dogs, but I don't get it. Wow, what's happening here? Absolutely. I felt myself getting reader whiplash just listening to Gareth talk about all of the different ways that can go wrong. So it's a very specific technique to head hop. Use it judiciously, and we're going to go into some examples here in a moment. But when it's not always bad, as with most things in any creative endeavor, it's not always bad. We want to talk about when it is a little less bad, when it's pretty bad, and when it's a little less bad. Wow. let's do this. Let's just move. Point of view, right? So we've talked about that is who the narrator is, and that third person limited point of view where the narrator is a little bit more closely tied to just one character, right? They may know what's going on in that character's head, but they don't know everything. Third person omniscient, godlike, if you will, knows everything that's going on in everybody's head. And when you head hop in a third person omniscient set or point of view, it makes sense. Because throughout your story, you've already established that the story is being told by a narrator in third person omniscient. So it makes sense that they're going to know what's going on in all the characters' heads.
Yeah, this third person omniscient narrator is they're aware of everything.
They're aware of everything.
They know inside and out. They know past and future. I think before we started the stream, we said that that's kind of what allows you to use the little did they know device, where you can tell the reader. Because if you're halfway through a book that's been written in third person limited and then you see something like that, it feels super weird. It's going to pull you out of the experience because it's not the way the story is being told.
Right.
But if you've gone omniscient, you've got a lot more freedom afforded to you.
You really do. When you're in that limited one, we're in the mind of, you can see that line goes directly to one stick figure. We're in the mind of a character during a scene. They can't possibly know what's happening in the next room. In third person omniscient, they do know that someone just stole a vase in the other room. It was Professor Plum in the library, but I'm Miss Scarlet in the dining hall. So having that ability to see all, know thoughts, know actions that are taking place in a different place. Very godlike access to the thoughts, feelings, actions of any character in the story. So it's a little less weird to head hop from that omniscient point of view. Romance genre often uses third person omniscient because they really do want to know, if I wanted to read a romance, talk about romance and not know what's going on in the other person's head, I would just live my normal life. When I read a romance novel, I want to know what's going on in both characters' minds and really understand the internal struggles that they're having. So you'll see a lot of romance using this tool, this POV, to get did I do that right? Is that, or they walk them back and forth?
Yeah, romance in general, it's a lot more accepted. Let's put it that way.
That's the phrase, yeah.
It's kind of what a lot of romance readers expect. And almost in a sense necessary, because if you think about you're restricting a scene or a chapter to one character's point of view entirely, it almost affords you a natural suspense where we know other things are happening elsewhere in the story, but we can't really be told about them right now because we don't want to head hop. So there's a natural suspense built into that. When we're writing romance, we're not necessarily going for all that much suspense. We want to know what these people are thinking and feeling in that moment and in that scene with the relationship between each other. So I think, as with anything on the head hopping, it's moderate yourself, even if you're writing romance. But romance does indeed afford itself a bit more leeway.
Absolutely. So speaking of genre-specific examples, which we really weren't, but I'm going to use this as the segue. Smooth, eh? I'm going to hand this over to Gareth to show us some real examples in AutoCrit using the reporting tools for POV consistency and see how we can help with all of these questions related to points of view. I'm going to make your screen large and take our faces off. There we go.
Okay.
And take it away.
Just a couple of comments there as well. April, main POV character goes unconscious, end the scene. Not necessarily end the scene, but some kind of break. We'll get to that, but it's signposted in some way that you're actually switching. Let the reader know that things are changing. Also, many third person omniscient encourage words and phrases like "meanwhile back at the ranch." It can be over here, over there. Meanwhile in the next room, this person was doing this nefarious thing, and that's just getting more suspense from the reader. again, there's a different way of working with storytelling in that sense, because you're actually setting up your main, let's say it's your protagonist, you're setting up your main character to encounter something that the audience already knows, the audience being you.
I like that.
And it can work that way, or you can do it that it's just the big revelation, as it is, in a limited point of view. It's a big revelation for the character just as it is for the reader. Either way works. It's just sort of getting it right when you do it. But in this example that we have on screen, I've loaded up a sample from, I've not read it, but what I'm told is a great American novel called Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. It's been adapted for TV and had sequels and won awards and all sorts. It's a Western story. And if I just switch to the other tab here. So what I've done with this excerpt, just to show you how you can kind of tackle this kind of thing, or locate potential head hops within AutoCrit, is in the word choice and the point of view consistency report. Now, this is part of the reason that I wanted to make sure we had defined the difference between point of view and perspective, because you do have to think about them differently, even though they're in here. So with the point of view consistency report, we break up first person, second person, and third person into different colors, so you can see it's quite obvious that this is a third person narrative with all our blue marks. You will, of course, occasionally get others that come in, because somebody talking to somebody is going to talk to them in the second person when they refer to them. As you see a couple here, shouting at pigs. And that'll naturally happen, but you would want to see, as opposed to head hopping, point of view switching is also a serious problem in narratives. Not what we're talking about today, but this report definitely helps you find that, where you can see the big blocks and where things might accidentally change from, oh, I was writing a third person story and now this whole chapter is first person. I must have, been asleep on the job there.
That's an interesting perspective, because a question has come in the community. Can you write the main story from your main character's POV, but then switch to a different, like, third person when your main character isn't in that scene? How would that work?
I have seen that kind of thing done. It's, again, use it sparingly and use it to a definite effect. The way that I would probably put it was in the sense of, again, I have to bring everything back to horror to put stuff into context here, but we're thinking of like an ancient evil sort of resting under the ground that's getting ready to come, and lay waste to everything. And in the meanwhile, we're following our main character on the surface, and they're going about their lives. And every now and then there's a chapter break, a chapter from the perspective of, what could be called like the sleeper or something like that, that's underneath this thing. So yes, you can break and like start giving history of that thing. It had slept for 30,000 years, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's very ominous that way, because it is like a narrator, like literally a voiceover narrator has stepped in and is like, it's been here for forever. And all that, it makes you feel a bit weird. So yeah, use it to effect, but using it all the time or chapter by chapter is quickly going to pull people out. It has to have a real something special or something meaty to it.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. Thank you.
So inside AutoCrit, what I've done here is, you'll notice in the point of view consistency, we not only have point of view consistency for our first, second, and third person indicators, we also have character names. So what I have done is, if you're a user of the system, just go into settings. Everybody can do this, even if you're using the free edition, and click Here's Update, and you can include character names there. I'm not sure if the POV consistency report is in the free edition, but you can certainly include and exclude words. So I've just loaded in some of the character names here from the story, and then it shows them here in my point of view report. The reason that's handy, or the reason I would use it, I'm just going to untick the POV ones and just tick my character names, is because, as Beth said earlier, you tend to find that point of view is anchored into a scene by the first character that's introduced. So this very book just opens with when Augustus came out on the porch. So we have just pretty much immediately and unconsciously, it's just the way this works in your head when you read things, kind of gone into his mind. We're behind Augustus's eyes, and this is where we expect to be. So whenever things are being said or thought, they're going to be from Augustus's point of view. So Augustus had a keen eye for sun. We're just kind of learning things about him here. This is This is all his. And if I scroll through, I can see the character names that I've defined here all highlighted. So I'm going to look out for points where I have multiple character names. And you can actually see as we scroll down here, of course, there's Call mentioned, but it's pretty much Augustus. This is definitely from his point of view. Or sorry, oh, I've just used it interchangeably. This is definitely from his perspective.
No. See how easy it is?
See what happens?
Yeah.
So as we go through here, now we've got some stuff about Call. Since there's a little switch here, we have 3 mentions of Call. It's like, have we just head hopped there? Reading the section, not really, no. At the very least, Call will come stomping out from the loss, only to be annoyed to discover it just being a snake. These are things that Augustus is aware of about Call, so we don't have to jump into his head to say this. Augustus knows it about him, so he's able to tell us, and we're still able to stay within that perspective without head hopping and drifting off. Scrolling on through, I would just, I keep going and read these bits where I could see things and jump between. It's like, have I jumped through heads? Now there's a little one here, but I don't think it's really all that bad here. Augustus maintained that pigs were smarter than all horses and most people. I claim that galled Call severely. So again, we're told something about Call here and his thoughts, and his perspective on the world is that pigs are not very smart. But this is being told because Augustus is aware of this. They've had arguments about it.
So it's clearly defined for us right in the sentence before that they've been having this argument ongoing for the last few years. So definitely it's something that Augustus would already know about Call. And then that next paragraph as well, attributing a quote to Call is even more in depth around what Augustus already knows about someone else.
That's a good way to sort of anchor that in there.
Yeah, I like that.
Called before going on to say worse things. We're not actually stepping into Call's head here and being told things that he's thinking that Augustus could not know. It's all based in their conversation. It's all things that have happened that Augustus was involved in. Yeah. So we're not head hopping. But this is the real handy way that I would do it in your own books is fill in your character names. You can decide if you want to, highlight Augustus or not. I would certainly keep them all highlighted for now and just scroll on through and look for these points where you have multiple connected, and look out for the points where you're starting a sentence with a name. Especially a paragraph or a chapter start is where you really have to get yourself anchored in that character there and understand that for most of the duration, if not all of that scene, you really want to stay in there, inside their head. One example that we put here just at the end of the excerpt for you, where head hopping does happen, because unfortunately it does happen quite a lot in this book. It's written, it's 1985 or something like that. So it's a little less, I guess, of a microscopic view put on this thing than you would find today.
Yeah.
I just want to say that. I don't want to say it's bad or anything, because obviously it's classic. So, but things are a little different stylistically, yet the concepts don't change. And this is a conversation around the dinner table here between the family members. And we have, "Want some buttermilk?" July asked. "No, sir," Joe said. He hated buttermilk, but July loved it, so that he always asked anyway. And then, "You ask him that every night." I believe this whole scene is supposed to be from Joe's perspective. Because we've been following Joe, but now we have "You ask him that every night," Elmira said. It irritated her that July came home and did exactly the same things day after day. So we've jumped into her head there. And I'll come back to that in just a sec, but then stop asking him. She said, let him get it on his own. She spoke with a heat that surprised July. So now we're thinking about how's July feeling about this. He's responding, and it's kind of inside. This isn't a show. Just like a little bit before that, this isn't a July was startled or it showed some indication. This is directly inside July's head. Why would it matter if he invited the boy? All he had to do was say no, which he had. This is where we start getting a little bit of the pronoun modeling happening here, because we're not quite sure.
All he had to do was
which
say
head we're meant to be,
and why would he invite it? Yeah.
Who's asking who?
Yes, so you can absolutely see that.
And well, it's good, he said quietly. Who, July or Joe?
Who? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Not actually sure. And And then Joe almost wished she had taken a glass since it would have kept July out of trouble, but it was too late. So now we're back in Joe's head. Quite a little bit of a bang, bang, bang hopping across people here. And as I said, it takes a little bit of parsing to really understand who's saying what.
It's a really compelling example.
And speaking about the sort of showing versus telling thing and characterization, this part here as well, it irritated her that July came home and did exactly the same things day after day. I mean, this is quite a big thing for a family dynamic or characters. Now, as I said, I haven't read the book entirely, so I don't know whether this is fed into or expanded after this scene. But that's the kind of thing that, like, when you live with somebody, is going to cause resentment and really could make it a fraught under that roof. Like, literally, it irritates her that he comes home and does the exact thing like this, like every day. She's annoyed with this. And then she says, "Stop asking him," she said sharply. You know, there's really getting snappy there.
What would you do differently here? Would you just expand it more and make it more illustrative, make it a bigger deal, more emphasis on it? Because it really will eventually undermine the family dynamic.
More emphasis. The next part, the "stop asking him," she said sharply. You know, it's been 4 months now and he ain't drunk a drop. She's kind of making the point there. So this is how you get away from the head hopping. We don't actually need to know this, because she goes on and says this. So we stay outside of Elmira's head, stay in one definite perspective for a character, and we pick up on this through her words. And then it would be later on in the, you know, throughout the novel as they interact, we get to understand just how annoyed she is at whether it's really getting on top of her or not. So
I can see a scene, you know, down the line where perhaps Elmira is like gritting her teeth and rolling her eyes and looking away and sighing and stuff. So being being more able to show using her, Elmira's physical actions and sighing and what have you would be terrific as well. And then that said sharply, really. Now, you know how we feel about adverbs.
It's an adverb, but
they're not always bad. This one works really
it works.
This one works really, really well. And the author's using it to underscore that she is irritated that July he does the same things all the time. So
it demonstrates one of the ways to sort of stay away from head hopping. And I think we say quite a lot that when you track down one kind of flag of an issue, it could always be directly related to something else. And in this case, I would say, you know, this kind of head hop is also directly related to our showing versus telling, because we eliminate both problems if we just get rid of that internal thought, that internal belief, because we have it shown right here in the dialogue. That's perfectly fine. This character's acting in a way that tells us she's fed up with this. And we stay in an external perspective when we don't jump into her head. It's really that simple.
Now, one other interesting part, because I see a comment in the viewership in the community. It could be argued that, can you scroll up just a little bit, Gareth, and grab that top paragraph there? No, sir, he hated butter. Okay, he loved it. So July loved it that July, Joe. I can't with that one. Let's do the next one. You ask him that every night. It irritated her that July came home and did exactly the same thing day after day. So whomever's point of view we are using, and I think it's Joe's, I'm not exactly sure. Couldn't it be said that Joe already did know that about July, about Elmira?
It may be the sequence is July's point of view, perspective, which it could be because we have a lot of July here.
A lot of July, and so I think we're
starting with Joe.
We're starting with Joe to get anchored, but it bears a little bit of thought. And this, in terms of reports, this is one of those that will require a lot of thinking and rereading to really understand what your characters know and what they don't know.
Yeah, it's one of these things that it's really just using it like this with the character names and ways there is to flag them up for yourself so you can go in with this kind of topic on your mind and know what you're looking for. It's not going to pull it out straight away and be like, "Hey, you're probably head hopping here." This is just a good way to approach the topic when you're doing that for yourself.
Yeah.
It's really just a power user move. It's like load it in, and once in a while, go through and look for the character names. And I would say the real thing you're looking for when it comes to head hopping as a topic is which characters you're anchoring to a scene to begin with, and whether the scene then varies a lot. Just kind of zoom in on that, check that out, and see whether you might be doing something that could be confusing a little bit like this.
Yeah. This passage was, when you break it down, this passage was quite confusing. There are several players or characters acting in this scene. There are definitely kind of things happening.
It's not that the dialogue
externally.
The dialogue is bad or anything like that. It actually, the conversation flows well. There's a point to it, saying things, but it takes a little bit of parsing to start with, and I think, as you said very early on, we want to keep readers flowing through. Anytime you get them to kind of skip and stop, and especially with this kind of as you're head hopping and it switches to pronouns, it's kind of like, who said that? What? Who's that about? Who's thinking that?
Yeah, pronouns as in there, character names in there. Wow, great example.
So that's it. Just a good way to track it down. And I think, as we said earlier, head hopping isn't the end of the world all the time. It's actually useful.
Sometimes it is, but no.
Yeah, so sometimes you can do it, and it's not a problem, especially, like we said, in romance. But and when you're in third-person omniscient, you're obviously a bit more free to readers won't feel so uncomfortable when you're in that point of view already. But just be careful with it. Don't think you've got free rein to give people whiplash back and forth all the way through your book, because they won't put up with it.
Reader whiplash. Yeah. If it becomes too back to the other point as well, it becomes distracting to the scene that you're trying to let your reader be inside. They're seeing those words on the page. They're trying to think through it instead of viewing it as kind of a cinematic approach to really just understand instinctively and experience and be part of that scene. So that's
these little moments that can creep in. I think you mentioned earlier from someone's perspective of not liking dogs, and if you set it up early that the character who's really the main protagonist of your story, going along, they love dogs and they're thinking about it, but at some point in a later chapter, you head hop really quickly and then mention somebody sneering at a dog. If that head hop is not performed perfectly, that's the kind of thing where your reader would be like, wait, I thought this person loved dogs, why they, and then you've pulled them out of the story at that point. So it's just watch out for little things like that.
So a quick question, sort of scenario from the community that I think will be very interesting for folks. A suspicious protagonist and antagonist who are facing off and kind of sizing each other up. They're having different thoughts than what they're saying. So wanting to hear them thinking one thing and saying something else, would that then be 4 points of view? Like, how does that? Wow, I can envision what's happening, but that is kind of the underpinning of an omniscient viewpoint. Is that correct? Or point of view? Is that correct?
Yeah, that something like that. You really would need to surround with an omniscient point of view. It's also something that, again, I would use very, very sparingly. If you could. Envisioning it on a page is the sort of thing I would think would be like a line of dialogue and then maybe an italicized line that's kind of revealing the thought or the truth behind that dialogue. Then the next line of dialogue. A very, very definite stylistic choice that shouldn't be used all the time. That's
a tough one. It's easier to think about in a movie for me, but
yeah, give a few voiceovers.
The narrator voiceover always helps. So think about that when you're considering such a face-off, and it's this in this example, it's probably a one-time thing. It's probably setting the scene for larger, protagonist antagonist interactions in the future. So getting that sorted right away might be kind of key to the whole thing. Another comment definitely applies here. Certainly showing and not just telling showing can be really powerful there. When we talked about dialogue tags and things like that, I think using it sparingly, thinking about dialogue tags and illustrative words rather than just saying he thought that was dumb. Like
exactly, yeah, that's a really good point, and it's kind of what we see here in this excerpt. A lot of writers will try to, I guess it's add some kind of punctuation or framing to what's being said. It's, I think, as we've said before, it's sort of not trusting your reader to figure it out for themselves, or not really having the confidence that the dialogue that's coming up is strong enough to convey that message. So you go to the point where you're like, oh, I'll just tell the reader how this character actually feels about this before they say the thing, because then that makes it abundantly clear. It's like, well, no, don't do that. Let the dialogue and the character stand on its own.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's do a quick recap. So, point of view is the voice of your narrator. Think first person, second person, third person, etc. The perspective is more about their mind, their thoughts, their worldview, their attitudes, their experiences and biases, and do they like dogs or not like dogs? What do they know about other parts of the story, other characters in the story, etc., and how's that coloring how they're narrating? It is quite complicated. You'll start to see it by using that point of view report within AutoCrit to ensure that you're consistent with your point of view. And if you choose to head hop, if you choose to switch that point of view, make sure that you're doing justice to the worldview and attitudes of the new quote unquote narrator that you're using. Thinking about keys to happy head hopping.
Happy head hopping.
Happy head hopping. Yes, absolutely. We know it can be confusing to readers if you do it too frequently or too quickly. So use it in moderation. Think about changing it at logical breaks, maybe a new scene, maybe a new chapter, maybe, anchoring it, which we'll talk about in a second. But think about logical breaks in the flow of the action of your story as a space to transition. And when you do transition, make it quite obvious. One way to make it more obvious is to anchor when you're doing a logical break and you start a new paragraph or scene. You want to make it obvious that you're transitioning. Mention that character right in the start of the paragraph. Now, it doesn't have to be the first word because you want to mix up your sentence starters, but having that anchor set in your reader's mind as they approach that paragraph or that scene or that chapter, they're like, oh, Amanda walked into the ballroom. We're thinking from Amanda's brain, right? We're behind Amanda's eyeballs. So being a little more obvious, as with all things, moderation. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, you can do as much as you can with sort of establishing that initial perspective just through the character name, but sometimes things change. It may be one character whose perspective this sentence actually is, this scene is actually from, is, say, watching someone else walk through that door. So the other character is mentioned first. You could do it that way. Again, it's just make sure that the reader is aware whose eyes they're looking through. And I think the logical breaks. One of the things you might see today, if you read a lot of young adult and especially sort of independent fantasy romance type stuff, is authors actually breaking up every chapter by a character's name. And it's like every chapter we're in a different perspective. So they almost avoid head hopping entirely just because chapter 1 is Linda, chapter 2 is Frank, Linda, Frank.
I love the Linda Frank story.
it goes that way. Now that's a simple and easy way to do it, especially if it's some kind of limited point of view.
But it's very held within that context. This is Linda's
Yeah.
chapter, and we are not getting into what's going on in Frank's brain because we don't know, because we're Linda. Making it, that's part of that transitioning, obviously, and also a logical break chapter-wise. It really does give you a chance to encapsulate it very cleanly. A little kind of I don't want to say gimmicky, but a very specific style choice if you want to go that way, but nice and clean in my opinion.
It's emblematic of just a totally clear cut way to do it.
Absolutely.
It's literally chapter by chapter. I mean, a reader knows this chapter we're from this perspective, this chapter we're from this perspective. So it's really just ask yourself, any time when you're in a scene and characters are interacting, are you tempted to say something from inside the brain of a different character than you've already been talking through? If you're tempted to, then just figure out whether that's just once, you're going to give us a little bit of information, or is it going to go back and forth? Because if it goes back and forth, things can get very confusing.
And I will hop heads right back over to mine. That didn't work either. My transitions are terrible today, but the good news is we are ready to wrap on head hopping. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's Deep Dive Live. Have fun checking out that point of view report inside of AutoCrit, and not just using it to make sure your POV is consistent, but also that your perspective, which is a little bit different, make sure that stays consistent as well. And we will join you back shortly.
Indeed. So just in case you didn't know, the options there is just down in the bottom left corner of your screen. Just go there in settings, and you can set the character names and track them all through your book. So pop in there and have a look at that once in a while, just to, it might be one of the last things you want to clean up at the end, is because it's again one of these very conceptual things that you might just jump in and fix.
It's very conceptual.
Keep an eye out for hopping heads.
Hopping heads. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.